Welcome to Look Ahead Radio with Tom Arms and Lockwood Phillips.
Coming up in just a moment, our weekly conversation with Tom Arms with Look Ahead Radio and, of course, LookAheadNews.com. He is part of Viewpoints Around the World here on the Talk Station. Numbers if you'd like to join us, and you're welcome to do so. He's talking to us live from London, 252 area code 247-7282. That's 247-7282. 910 area code of our listening audience, 353-4674. That's 353-4674. Toll free 800-818-2255. Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio joining us and Viewpoints Around the World. And with that, Tom, good evening. And my goodness, what's it like in London as we speak? Are you all decked out for the holidays?
Well, London's a bit understated compared to the United States. I had my brother-in-law come over and visit about 10 years ago, and he was very disappointed. He was expecting to see even more lights than you'd see in New York or Washington. And there's much fewer.
Was he looking for Bob Cratchit and Scrooge by any chance?
He was. Okay. He found a lot of Scrooges, I think.
Speaking
but
of...
the weather here is almost spring-like.
Oh, really?
It's very nice.
Oh, well, we're about to have a major cold front move into our area, so we may be sending it your way here in a few moments. Well, the weather's been beautiful. What is the mood in London? Did things sort of perk up there in London and the UK during Christmas? Is it as thrilling and exciting, and do people smile a lot this time of year, or is it business as usual?
I think, people do smile a lot. Yeah, there's Christmas carolers. We've had a few people come around singing Christmas carols. They usually sing to raise money for charity, which is nice. Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a happy time of year. The schools have just started going out. They've let the children loose on the general population. Not all the schools yet, but some of them. And people take off 1 or 2 weeks at this time of year. They just disappear completely from work.
Okay,
and a lot of offices just shut down entirely.
Wow. And what about travels during the Christmas season there in the UK and in Europe? Do they use Christmas as a travel time?
Oh, yes. Well, they all want to be with their family. Everyone wants to be home for Christmas, just as in America. This year it's going to be a bit difficult because there's a few train strikes and things. And in fact, next week, the mailmen are going to be going on strikes and they won't be delivering Christmas cards.
What's the cause of this unrest other than Brexit? We'll get to that as well. But what's the cause?
Well, it's basically, the fact that for the past 10 years, it's very similar to what it is in America. The economy's been stagnant, that real living wages have not really gone up at all, and people getting fed up with it.
We have found a solution for our stagnant economy.
We don't know if it's a solution yet.
Oh, yes, it is. I mean, we're seeing jobs being announced and, of course, the stock market. And I just saw the dollar is improving significantly, which, of course, is going to have an impact on us. There's a smile on the face of a lot of people in business, and jobs seem to be improving. Of course, one might offer that as a result of the recent election with Donald Trump as the president-elect. Let's talk about some of the decisions of the new president-elect, Tom. Tom Arms, of course, of Look Ahead Radio and LookAheadNews.com joining us. What is the reaction, because it's been a big topic, Secretary of State, what is the reaction with the announcement of Mr. Tillerson, currently the CEO of Exxon?
The Donald was keeping that, to a last minute, wasn't he? That was going to be the last appointment he made.
No, there's still some
Well,
appointments.
not quite the last, but one of the last.
Yes.
And when you consider it's probably the most important cabinet position, it was a bit surprising. I think there's mixed reactions. One, there's a lot of respect for Tillerson as a person and as a businessman.
Okay.
There's no doubt that he is a very, very bright man. But there is concern that his close relations with the Russians is merely, it's a confirmation of a major shift towards a pro-Russian policy. And this makes the Europeans very nervous because they are anti-Russian. They are seriously, seriously, seriously worried about Russia.
I find that interesting in light of the fact, and it's been mentioned here recently, that even President Obama had promised after his second election that he would be working on a Russian reset with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Was there no concern at that time?
You mentioned this reset quite a bit. And, they are not opposed, the Europeans are not opposed to good relations with Russia. They're just opposed to Vladimir Putin's zero-sum game philosophy. And that means he seems to approach foreign relations and diplomatic relations on a simply win-lose basis.
Right.
And most diplomacy should be done on a win-win basis. And since that zero-sum, there was before the zero-sum button, or not the zero-sum, the reset button was presented by Hillary, there was a dip in relations. But after it was presented, after that, you had the invasion and annexation of Crimea. Mm-hmm. You had the invasion of eastern Ukraine. You had the attack on Syria.
Right.
You've had war crimes committed in Syria. You've had a number of these things happen as a result of the reset.
But
and I think from what my reading of the situation is, that made people think twice about the wisdom of the reset.
Okay, and I'm wondering, and we've got to go to a break. What about their thoughts, thinking twice about both the leadership of President Obama and definitely Secretary of State Hillary Clinton? She seemed to have gotten very little criticism from the European community. Why?
Because they compared her to Donald Trump.
Oh, that's a lousy excuse. I've got a real quick question.
Well, that's the truth.
No, let me. Well, wait a second. Look at what's happening in this.
I
understand.
Compared it to Donald Trump, and they said, who is likely to be more pro-European and more anti-Russian? Because that is in our interest.
Well, I think
Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton. They said that Hillary Clinton was going to be more pro-European and anti-Russian, which is in the Europeans' interests.
Okay,
that.
Well, here's the other quick question for you, and we've got to go to a quick break here. Rex Tillerson, CEO of Exxon. We're talking about oil reserves, and of course the recent détente that has been established between OPEC and non-OPEC countries, Russia, Saudi Arabia. And that this has a very negative impact on Europe because there's a promise of tightening of supplies. With about a minute to go, is there some acknowledgement that maybe Mr. Tillerson might be the right person to be talking to Russia in this particular situation?
I don't think they regard that as making a big difference.
Okay. All right. We're going to come right back after. That's interesting because it will have a negative impact on the economy there in Europe. And of course, we'll get to that as well, along with, the issue of hacking. Apparently, there's some concern about Russian hacking in Germany, which I find interesting. Stay with us. Our guest this afternoon, or if you will, co-host, Tom Arms of LookAhead Radio and LookAheadNews.com. You're listening to Viewpoints Around the World.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
This is Tom Arms with LookAheadNews.com's World Report for the week before Christmas, starting the 19th of December. LookAheadNews.com broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. Monday is the final chapter in America's long and exhausting electoral process as the 532 electors cast their ballots for the president and hopefully close the book on one of the dirtiest campaigns in American history. Christmas week is a bad week for British industrial relations this year, with strikes planned by train and underground drivers and mailmen refusing to deliver Christmas cards and parcels. On Wednesday, the American government says Merry Christmas to Japan by returning to the Japanese government 10,000 acres of land in Okinawa, which had been used by the American forces there. It is also a birthday present for Japanese Emperor Akihito, who turns 83 on Friday. On Thursday, Russian President Vladimir Putin gives his traditional annual press conference to the world's press, On Christmas Day, Pope Francis will deliver his State of the World Christmas message, better known as Urbi et Orbi. President Obama leaves for Hawaii on Friday for his holiday break, and Donald Trump will be busy wishing everyone a Merry Christmas to counter the politically correct term of Happy Holidays. British Prime Minister Theresa May plans to watch television. And finally, next Sunday, it is peace and goodwill throughout the world everywhere, except in the Peruvian province of Chumbivilcas. Christmas Day in that province coincides with the Indian Takanaki Festival, when grudges are settled with refereed fistfights. But in the spirit of Christmas, each fight ends with a hug. And that was next week's Christmas Week News Today, so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned after this message for LookAheadNews.com's expanded world analysis.
Quick, what do these sounds have in common? These are the sounds of geography. Geography helps us understand connections between people and places. But our kids aren't getting enough of it. Half can't locate Japan or India, and 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. So we created MyWonderfulWorld.org to give kids the power of global knowledge. Go to MyWonderfulWorld.org to learn more. It's a wonderful world.
This is Tom Arms of LookAheadNews.com's expanded world analysis for the week beginning the 19th of December. LookAheadNews.com broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. For the first time in living memory, the world is paying attention to the American Electoral College vote on Monday. Almost every one of America's 56 presidential elections, the Electoral College vote has been an unremarked rubber stamp ceremony. Not this one. Some electors have threatened to exercise their constitutional right to vote to keep Trump out of the White House. They will certainly fail, but the threat underscores American divisions. While America faces political divisions, Britain faces industrial action. Christmas revelers will have difficulty next week, staggering from party to party, as sections of both the railway and London's underground are closed by strikes. On top of that, Christmas cards and presents will fail to arrive before the big day because of a planned strike by mailmen. About 70% of the Okinawans appreciate the money and protection that 30,000 American soldiers bring to the island. But the remaining 30% vehemently oppose it and regularly and loudly demonstrate. Up until Wednesday, U.S. bases will occupy more than a fifth of the island, making it America's unsinkable aircraft carrier in Asia. But on Wednesday and Thursday, the U.S. government says Merry Christmas by returning 10,000 acres to Japanese control. They could also be wishing happy birthday to Japan's Emperor Akihito, who turns 83 2 days before Christmas. Earlier this year, the occupant of the chrysanthemum throne was rumored to be ready to abdicate in favor of Crown Prince Naruhito, but the palace was quick to announce that the emperor continues to the end. Once a year, President Vladimir Putin invites the world's press into the Kremlin to answer questions. This year's press conference is on Thursday, when the Russian leader is expected to be grilled on hacking into computers in America and Europe, alleged war crimes in Syria, the continued Russian presence in eastern Ukraine, and the Kuril island chain between Japan and Russia. The Russian president will also face criticism from Pope Francis in his Christmas Day Urbi et Orbi State of the World address. Donald Trump, who clashed with the Pope during his campaign, may also fall under the not-so-benevolent papal gaze. And that was next week's expanded world analysis from LookAheadNews.com, along with best wishes for a very Merry Christmas. Stay tuned for Viewpoints Around the World with myself and Lockwood Phillips.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio and also LookAheadNews.com. And just to remind you, every Friday afternoon, Look Ahead Radio is heard here on the talk station, along with radio stations around the world. He's got a growing audience. Tom, let's continue this conversation about Russia. And there's several things I want to talk to you about. We do have to, if we get a chance, talk about Russia and Japan signing a deal. But let's start with Russia, the whole issue of hacking. We'll start with the concerns related to the Electoral College. Hacking is really, it's a question whether it's hacking or just leaking information that was quite interestingly enough, accurate. These were emails that were distributed within the DNC and, of course, also the Republican National Committee, but DNC. And unfortunately...
But did the Russians leak them, or was it leaked by the DNC? The evidence points to the Russians leaking them because the Russians hacked into it.
Even if they were hacking into the emails, this is something that is a concern. And by the way, don't we want to know the facts? Don't we want to know what was being said behind closed doors? Aren't we interested in transparency?
You don't want selective facts, Lockwood.
What was selective about it?
I've been told that they also hacked into the Republican computers.
Uh-huh.
Now, they didn't leak any Republican documents.
Just on the off chance?
Just the Democratic ones. They only leaked the ones that would be damaging. So it's selective leaks. That's what leakers do.
Well, maybe the Republicans...
Ones who are trying to influence public policy or people's views. They selectively leak the things that are going to support what their aims are.
Maybe the Republicans didn't say anything that was embarrassing or hypocritical. Just an offer. Or secondly...
I think that's highly unlikely because everyone says things that are embarrassing and hypocritical.
No.
I do. You
no,
do.
I do not. I do not. I trust me,
I do.
Shame on you. Shame on you. Tom, we're going to have to...
I do.
But here's the kicker.
Here's the kicker. Not one of us who can cast that first stone.
So we just had a recent experience here. This is it's a sad story. Wake Forest College, which is a small Baptist college, about 4,000 students, has a football team, but maybe I'm misstating it, and someone can call and correct me on this. Anyhow, it was discovered that a radio announcer who actually covers the Wake Forest football program was providing information to other teams if they wanted to buy it from him. So the whole issue of leaking information, you've got people that somebody was trying to get that information anyhow. So is that perceived there? And we're going to get to Germany here, but what's the perception on this issue in the European community? Do they see this as conflict or a problem, or are they just
Yes, they definitely see it as a problem. And they see it as a problem, but not just for the U.S. I mean, we've had, and moving on to Germany and Britain, and in fact, Germany and Europe, two statements this week. One from Alex Younger, who's the head of MI6 here in the UK, and the other one from Bruno Kohl, who's the head of German intelligence. And they have both said that Russia is now, as we speak, hacking into West European computers all the time, especially of political parties, and they have done it in America. They confirm what the CIA is saying, that it was done during the American presidential election. It's being done now in Germany. It's being done now in Britain. It's being done in France and Holland, all these countries. And they say that there's a real danger that Russia will use this information to basically damage the electoral process by selective leaking.
Here's the question.
They will leak things which are in their interest for the public to know.
Here's the problem. And I would argue we've had this situation with Donald Trump, who used inappropriate language and descriptions and was recorded doing that, which, of course, interestingly enough, got leaked to the press, I might add, and was damaging to that campaign.
But not by a foreign government.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
No, it does matter.
It doesn't matter.
Want a foreign government determining who you elect.
Oh, wait a second. This is information that is available. And my comment to you is, Tom, it seems to me that this is a clear indication to anyone involved in the electoral process. They need to follow a certain degree of decorum and protocol. And if they don't, you know what? Whether it's discovered by Tom Arms at LookAhead Radio or discovered by Ross behind the wall window and board is immaterial. The public, transparency, it just strikes me that people are now going to have to be a little more cautious about what they say as they do. And this has been a concern of yours related to Donald Trump in the sense that you're never sure what he's going to say in a diplomatic area. And, there have been some concerns about this. It's a learning experience, is it not, Tom?
Lockwood, are you saying that it's perfectly acceptable for the Russians to hack into the political parties and into the various governments of people's computers and to spread the information that they find there?
No, I'm saying that you've got to be careful.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
But if it weren't, and by the way, the folks at WikiLeaks,
so you
folks
would
at
condemn
WikiLeaks,
that.
the folks at as a journalist, if I had information and it's important to the discussion and the debate, yes, I would have released that information, as good journalists should. Let's go to break on that one. We got to get back to this because I want to also talk to you about Russia and Japan. Very interesting conversation with Tom Arms of LookAhead Radio and, of course, LookAhead News as well. You're listening to Viewpoints Around the World.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
They say the best things in life are free. So, hey, why are we paying so much for our basic information and entertainment needs? The average cable TV bill has more than doubled in the last 10 years. The price of movie tickets keeps going up. So, exactly what is free today anyway? Well, you're listening to it. Local radio. Support the advertisers that support this radio station. And keep listening. We won't send you a bill. There are still some things you just shouldn't have to pay for.
We now return to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints Around the World with Look Ahead Radio host Tom Arms, also with Look Ahead Radio News. That's lookaheadnews.com, lookaheadnews.com. Tom, as we were wrapping it up a few moments ago, I mentioned the need to talk about Russia and Japan and the fact that apparently Russia is expanding its influence and working on a deal with the Kurila Islands. That's been an island group that, if I'm not mistaken, Russia and Japan have fought over. The Sino-Japanese war was fought over that, was it not?
No, it wasn't fought over that. But basically, it's been part of Russia since the end of World War II. Mm-hmm. When Truman dropped the bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the Russians saw an opportunity and immediately declared war on Japan. They hadn't been fighting Japan up to then. And they invaded Korea, North Korea, and they invaded the Kuril Islands, which are a chain of islands, an archipelago, which stretches from the northernmost home island of Japan, called Hokkaido, to the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia. And they invaded that and annexed it and threw out the 17,500 Japanese who live there. And they refused to give it back ever since. And the Japanese have been demanding it. It was actually ceded to them as part of the treaty, but the Japanese, sort of hedged their bets on it a bit in the treaty. And there has never actually been a formal end to World War II, to the war between Japan and Russia, because of the dispute over these islands.
Wow.
Which is called the Kuril Islands.
Kuril Islands, okay. And a quick question. In light of the fact that China has been expanding in the Pacific, what does this say about Russia? Are they interested in strengthening their relations in the Pacific?
Well, they're always interested in strengthening their relations in the Pacific, and they are a Pacific nation as well. Right. They have quite a border on the Pacific, but I think it's more a case of the Japanese want to have better relations with Russia as a counter to China.
That has been a concern for the Japanese and also related to North Korea as well. Yeah.
They're hoping, the Japanese are hoping that there will be an agreement to return to the islands. They're called Kunishiri and Etarahu. And if that is the case, which I think is highly unlikely, I don't think Putin will agree to it. If that's the case, then the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will call a snap election in January, which will almost certainly win, because it's a big, big thing in Japan.
Interesting.
But it's also a big, big thing in Russia. They don't want to give up the islands. And all they are prepared to concede, or what they've talked about, is setting up special economic zones and allowing some of the Japanese to return to the islands for visits, things like that.
All right, quick question. Are you telling me that we do not have any formal agreement at this point? It's just the initiation of discussions?
No. The two men have agreed to take a hot bath That's about it.
Okay. All right. I think that's important. Oh, well, that's important. All right. Since we're in that area of the world, let's talk about China and Miss Canada. Interesting story appearing in the New York Times this week.
Yeah.
Miss Canada, who is a Chinese, her father is still living in China, but she is now a citizen of Canada and is engaged in the Miss World contest, is having some interesting challenges. Tell us about that.
Anastasia Lin. Anastasia Lin left China when she was 13, but her father is still back there in China, and she moved to Canada. She has Canadian citizenship. A very attractive, looks like a little doll. She's very pretty. But she's also a human rights activist, speaking out against human rights violations in China, and a member of the Falun Gong, whom the Chinese are, they hate. And last year, she was in the Miss Universe competition in 2015. And that was held in China.
Right.
And they refused to let her into the country. Not only did they refuse to let her into the country, but they forced her father into bankruptcy by forcing all the companies that he was dealing with not to buy from him. So the organizers, who are a British company, the organizers said, well, it was Miss Universe last year in China. This year, it's the Miss World, and we're having it outside Washington, D.C. You can enter that. And she thought, great, I'm going to get my own back on the Chinese. But, big but here, it was sponsored by a Chinese company. And so when she got there, she was told, you can't say anything to anyone about China or anything else.
And apparently they've even controlled access to the press. The press have not even had the opportunity to speak to her.
No,
and
only the Chinese press.
Okay, here I've got two quick questions for you, Tom. Tom Arms, again, of LookAhead Radio and also LookAheadNews.com. Tom, we've talked about China and the relations with the U.S. and, of course, President-elect Donald Trump's call to Taiwan. First question, and this is related to this topic. One, how is this perceived, and is it being read, and is it a concern there in Europe related to how the Chinese are reacting to this? Does anybody care?
No, it's not reported at all.
Wow. Okay, next.
I haven't seen it.
All right.
The only place I've seen it is in the New York Times.
Okay, the next thing that I think is important.
And in fact, I'm going to try and rectify it by writing a story, because it is a British company, and it's the company that has told her that, you mustn't speak to anybody. They're the ones who've gone along with this.
All right.
Which I think is a disgrace.
All right. The other aspect of this is the concerns that were expressed in Europe about the, if you will, the misstep as it was described. I don't describe it as such, where President-elect Donald Trump received a phone call from the Taiwanese ambassador, as I recall. I mean, he's not an ambassador, he's an envoy. But the point is that...
Received a call from the president.
From the president of Taiwan. My apologies. Thank you for correcting me on that. But my point is, there was a lot of concern and complaints about this, that it might interrupt an issue, a problem with the Chinese. And yet we're seeing very example of the kind of intimidation and extortion that China is able to initiate all the way to a UK company, a British company. I'm wondering, might this also indicate that maybe we have given a little too much concern and interest to the Chinese? This is really quite...
Can I answer that with a question? Because
feel free.
I agree with you about China, all right? But why are you so concerned about Chinese human rights, and you're not concerned about human rights in Russia and Syria?
I don't think it's an issue of human rights in this particular case. She wants to speak about human riits. She should in the United States.
I'm saying she should.
Yeah, right.
I'm saying
okay.
she should.
So that I don't think.
But
wait a second. But
Trump administration says that the human rights violation. They haven't actually gone on about Anastasia Lin. I don't think they've said anything about her yet. But unless I've missed it. But it's. I think you have to be even-handed.
Well, wait a second.
When we're dealing with human rights, you can't say that we can have good relations with Russia and ignore the fact they have invaded the Crimea and that they're killing thousands of people in Aleppo, and at the same time say, terrible human rights in
wait,
China.
Wait a second.
You have to attack both of them.
But I think
they're both wrong.
This is not even the argument about which I'm speaking, Tom. Tom Arms, of course, of Look Ahead Radio and also LookAheadNews.com. The issue here is the influence of China to be able to restrain an individual who is not only not a citizen of China, but not in China. Whether this person wants to speak about
that is another issue.
The
which
Martians,
is very important.
the Martians, or anything else, they should have the privilege to do so. But yet, China has this ability to intimidate a British company in the United States. It is stunning. It has
had that ability since imperial days, and it's used it.
Well, it is.
There are 50 million. There are 50 million overseas Chinese, and both Taiwan and Beijing have ministries devoted to dealing with overseas Chinese.
I understand,
and
but
they regard these Chinese as being part of the extended Chinese family.
But wait a second.
That they should toe the line.
She is a Canadian citizen. She's in the United States, and she's participating in a British event, Miss World, and yet I mean it's stunning. I will leave it at that. I just find that stunning.
I don't disagree with you.
All right, let's move on. I am just amazed by that. Okay, let's talk about the WHO report on malaria before we go to this next break.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the WHO, or World Health Organization,
as opposed to the band. Yes.
Yes, as opposed to the band. The band has that's a story which I must tell you sometime.
Okay.
About myself and the WHO.
Oh my goodness.
But they've just published their annual report on malaria, and the incidence of malaria is going down. In fact, 2 more countries have been declared malaria-free.
Wow.
Kyrgyzstan and Sri Lanka. But having said that, something like 400,000 people died in 2015, most of them under the age of 5.
Wow.
Most of them in sub-Saharan Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Now, last week, I did, for my other report, the LookAheadNews.com report, a trailer for this with the Malaria Consortium. And I said that they had said that, in fact, there was a danger because of a drop in the incidence of malaria, there was a danger of governments cutting back on their funds.
Right.
And if they did, it would really have dramatic impact on malaria, and in fact, it would come back with a vengeance. In fact, that's more or less exactly what the WHO have said in their annual report.
Okay.
They said that
don't be complacent.
Funding for malaria research is flatlined over the past 5 years, and there is a danger that it could start to go back up again.
Complacency. Understood. Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio with us this evening, and of course, LookAheadNews.com. Heard the radio program, heard on radio stations around the world, in foreign countries as well, and of course every Friday evening here on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
Observations of an Expat by Tom Arms from LookAheadNews.com. It's official. The winner of the U.S. presidential elections is Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. I hear you. Putin's name was nowhere near the ballot papers. It was Clinton versus Trump, and a few also-rans. And, of course, it will be Donald J. Trump who takes the oath of office on the steps of the Capitol building and then moves into that prime piece of real estate at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But it was Putin and the corrupt Russian oligarchy who are the biggest beneficiaries of Trump's election. The appointment of Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State confirmed it and the Trump administration's swing to a pro-Russian foreign policy. Exxon CEO Rex Tillerson is undoubtedly a brilliant businessman. He's also a close friend of Putin and an even closer friend of Putin's loyal lieutenant Igor Sechin. He's also an opponent of Western sanctions against Russia and a man who will become very, very rich if those sanctions are lifted. Of course, Texan Rex still has to be confirmed by the Senate, but Republicans have a solid majority in the upper house, and Tillerson has the backing of Republican foreign policy luminaries such as Condoleezza Rice and Robert Gates, both of whom now work for lobbyists retained by ExxonMobil. Putin's aims are simple: to re-establish Russian hegemony in Eastern Europe as a base for political supremacy in Eurasia, to replace the United States as the major non-Arab power in the Middle East, and to stabilize his domestic political power base by engineering the lifting of Western sanctions. Even before the election of Trump and the nomination of Tillerson, things were going Putin's way. The two biggest bulwarks against the expansion of Russian influence in Europe are the EU and NATO. The first provides a political and economic alternative, and the other protects it with a US-backed defensive umbrella. European unity was already suffering from its failure to recover from the 2008-2009 banking crisis and the refugee crisis of 2015 when Britain voted Brexit. That was quickly followed by the referendum vote in Italy, which strengthened that country's Eurosceptic movement, and the selection of pro-Russian François Fillon as the Republican Party candidate in next spring's French presidential elections. As for NATO, well, from its 1949 start, the European allies have doubted the sincerity of Washington's commitment to their defense. Moscow, under the communists and Putin, has consistently encouraged the doubters in an effort to decouple Western Europe from the United States. Donald Trump's campaign rhetoric about recognizing the Russian annexation of Crimea, lifting sanctions against Russia, refusing to come to the aid of a NATO ally who has not committed at least 2% of their GDP to defense spending, and now the nomination of Rex Tillerson, has only strengthened the hands of those doubters and increased the vulnerability of Europe to Russian pressure. If Trump's intention is to annoy and worry Europe, then he doesn't need to do any more. He's done enough just by raising questions which have forced Europeans to rethink their relationships with democratic America, authoritarian Russia. As for the Middle East, well, Putin won in Aleppo. Syria's President Assad is now likely to stay in power. He owes Putin big time. The Russians have a solid military presence in the heart of the Arab world and a mountain of political capital. It would appear that it was Russian military success in Syria that won the amoral heart of Donald Trump. The warplanes of single-minded Vladimir Putin are extremely effective at killing the Islamic jihadists, whose elimination is the stated number one foreign and defense policy objective of the American president-elect. The Russian planes are also remarkably good at eliminating innocent women and children and humanitarian aid convoys. For President-elect Donald J. Trump, it appears to boil down to a simple case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The problem is that in this case, the enemy of Trump's enemy is also the enemy of his country's old and established friends in Europe.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Tom Arms with Look Ahead Radio and LookAheadNews.com with us this evening here on Viewpoints Around the World. Tom, thank you for staying with us. 100 Christmas trees in one German house?
Yep, it's a German couple called Thomas and Suzanne Jaromin, and they live in the small town of Rintown, and they just love Christmas. And so they decorate. Well, they've gone out and they started 2 months ago. They bought 100 Christmas trees, and they've decorated them with 16,000 Christmas decorations.
Wow.
There's only one room that doesn't have a tree. And that's because the wife refuses to have a Christmas tree in the bedroom.
I just can't understand that. My question is, how long did it take them to decorate all these trees?
2 months.
And how long will it take them? Will they be pulling them down or dismantling them?
I have no idea.
And by the way, are these?
I just leave them up.
I'm thinking the same thing. Are these what we call live trees? Are these natural trees, or are they synthetic trees?
I think they're all live trees.
Wow. Well, they'll get a little dry and anticipate they'd be shedding a lot. Is this
if they use fake trees, they could keep them up all year.
They can. My question is this generating a lot of visitors to their home?
Oh, yes. Yes, they get a lot of it, especially the press. I mean, it's in all the newspapers over here.
100 trees. How big a house?
It's, I think, 4 bedrooms. It's not huge.
4 bedrooms is pretty large. 100 trees. I'd be interested in knowing where they sit.
Under the trees.
I'm sorry I even asked. Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio with us this evening. And Tom, we've got to close on the issue of hacking, and I would suggest that we make sure that all of our conversations in the future are definitely something we won't be frightened about. So we'll chat about that again in the future as well. Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio with us evening. And Tom, are you getting ready for Christmas?
Oh, yes. Yes, I'll tell you all about it next week.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Stay tuned for more here on the Talk Station. Of course, stay tuned for next Wednesday's program. We'll get all the details of Tom's preparations for Christmas there in London. You've been listening to Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio and LookAheadNews.com.
Look Ahead Radio is a production of the Talk Station.